Thank you. We turn now to the next item, which is topical questions, and our first question is from Daniel Johnson.
To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to ensure the Royal Hospital for Sick Children is fit for purpose in light of reports that the existing building needs over £700,000 worth of significant maintenance work.
Cabinet Secretary Jean Freeman.
The £700,000 refers to backlog maintenance, which includes works to improve patient and parents' environment, fire safety, heating, ventilation, roofing and redecoration at Sheens. Parent overnight accommodation and the hospital's catering facilities for families and staff have been improved. The Scottish Government's Oversight Board continues to assess what further improvements are required to ensure that the existing sites can continue to provide high-quality, safe clinical services. On the 17th of October, the Oversight Board agreed to the replacement of interventional neuroradiology equipment at DCN, and at the Sick Kids, the boards have begun work to increase the emergency department capacity to maintain flow in advance of the winter months, with that enhanced area being clinically operational from tomorrow.
Daniel Johnson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer, but anyone who spent any time at the old Sick Kids building didn't need an FOI to tell them that it was overdue in terms of maintenance. While my daughter was there, one medical team was 1.5 hours late for their daily ward round because the ceiling had fallen in on their meeting room. The sad truth is the old site had been allowed to deteriorate on the promise of a new building, a promise that is clearly still to be met. The £700,000 is just the significant maintenance defects, with a total of £1.5 million apparently needed, with particular concern regarding reports of issues having been identified with ventilation and water systems, given the very serious issues that have been uncovered elsewhere in this country. So can the Cabinet Secretary provide insight into the nature and seriousness of these defects and whether there are any concerns for the safety of current patients? When were these defects identified? And can she confirm when these and the full £1.5 million worth of remedial works will be complete?
Cabinet Secretary.
So I'm sure Mr Johnson will recall when I made one of the statements about the situation with Lothian Sick Kids Hospital, both the new site and the work that was needed in the existing sites until the new site is safe for use, that I also advised the Chamber of what was estimated as a £16.1 million bill. I think I also provided him with the breakdown of that, and £7.2 million has been set aside within that for the cost of maintaining and improving the existing site. And much of the work that I have outlined, further work that has been underway in order to increase the footprint of the emergency department and the waiting area of the emergency department, to move outpatients to undertake some of the work, including indeed on that ceiling, is work that the staff, when I visited them in September and asked those questions about what was needed, was work that they outlined to me there. The board has undertaken that work in terms of ventilation. Both existing sites, that's DCN and the Sick Kids, Sheens, Lothian have confirmed that the ventilation systems have been reviewed in line with recent changes to national guidelines, that they continue to be safe, and that there may be some upgrading work needed because they are going to have to use those systems for longer than originally planned. That is much of what the additional work that is needed has arisen because of that. We continue, of course, the board remains at level 4. We continue with our oversight board looking at both the existing sites and what needs to be done there, making sure that work is done, but also progressing the work on the new site to ensure that it meets the timeline that I have set out previously.
Daniel Johnson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and again, thank you to the Cabinet Secretary. And just to clarify on what she has just said, can I ask whether or not this £1.5 million is the total bill of required works, or are there any additional categories that will need to be included? And could she also confirm whether this £1.5 million sum, which has been reported in the press, is included in the £16 million sum that she referred to in her answer? And if not, when will we know the final cost of putting right 2 hospitals, which are, by the Scottish Government's own definition, substandard?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, there are 2 hospitals that we have agreed need replaced, and the replacement hospital needs to be safe before patients and staff can go to that. hospital. I think it is unfair to use that phrase in terms of the patients and the staff who currently use both those sites, and in terms of the staff who are working very hard to ensure that those sites continue to deliver the very high quality of service that they do deliver. As I've said, the total amount that we estimated would be required in terms of costs associated to make the new hospital fit for purpose, costs of maintaining the existing sites and other costs was 16.1 million. The 1.5 will be part of that. And of course this comes from the NHS Scotland budget. It does not come from NHS Lothian, so it should have no impact on their overall financial viability. The final costs of other works that may need to be required, I'm very happy to report back to Mr. Johnson, I was going to say Mr. Daniel, well, Mr. Daniel, to Mr. Daniel Johnson once all of that work has been completed. Some of it, of course, includes moving what is new equipment in the new site into the existing sites, very sensible, so that they can continue to be used, but also that additional equipment for DCN to ensure that it can continue to operate as fully as it needs to.
Miles Briggs, to be followed by Monica Lennon.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary specifically has mentioned the ventilation system, and the response I received from NHS Lothian states that the ventilation systems have also been reviewed in line with recent changes to national guidance. Although this guidance does not apply to existing facilities, our review outlined maintenance and upgrades that would be required if it was to apply. Given the national concerns around ventilation systems, what has the Cabinet Secretary asked NHS Lothian specifically on this, given that this hospital could not be just a year to be used, but beyond that?
Cabinet Secretary.
The NHS Lothian response is accurate in that the national guidelines, the new national guidelines, do not apply to existing sites. I've asked the Oversight Board to continue to have detailed discussion with NHS Lothian about what additional upgrades may be required, what impact that may have, and do the risk assessment against those upgrades against impact on existing patient and healthcare delivery, so that we can take a decision about what level of upgrade, if any, is required to the existing ventilation system to take it through to the autumn of next year.
And Monica Lennon.
Thank you. In addition to the maintenance backlog at the existing hospital, is it acceptable to the Cabinet Secretary that NHS Lothian is still paying around £1.4 million a month to a private consortium for a replacement hospital that is unsafe and hasn't seen a single patient? What action has the government taken to investigate these payments being stopped and the money that's been paid out already being recouped to the health service?
Cabinet Secretary.
So, as we've explained before, the money that is being paid per month is part of the contract, and that contract is the responsibility of NHS Lothian. It became their responsibility when they took completion of the new hospital. So for them to stop paying that would be to break the contract. The public inquiry will investigate those matters. We'll see whether or not the suppliers of the hospital, if you like, the ISHL and Multiplex and others, where accountability and responsibility lies. But right at this point, whilst I share Ms Lennon's frustration about money being spent for something that cannot be used, while additional money has to be spent in order to ensure that the existing sites continue to deliver high-quality healthcare, I absolutely share that. I would not urge any NHS board to break a contractual requirement which it has entered into. So I do not intend to tell them to stop paying that, and if they ever thought that they should stop paying it, I would be very strongly urging them not to do so, because they've entered into a legal contract. Other matters around the wisdom of doing so, taking that completion of that site when self-evidently, as we discovered, it was not suitable for patients and staff to move into. All of those other matters will of course be picked up and looked at forensically in the public inquiry. My focus is on making sure that the existing sites remain fit for the patients and staff who need them, and that we continue on track to deliver entry into the new hospital in a manner that is safe for patients and staff.
Thank you. Question 2, Patrick Harvey.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to recent reports on spending practices at the Scottish Qualifications Authority.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government expects all public sector bodies, including the Scottish Qualifications Authority, to ensure that their travel and subsistence policies deliver the best value for money possible for the Scottish taxpayer. The SQA has made clear that all international travel and accommodation bookings by its staff are pre-approved, accounted for against set budgets and subject to external independent audit. In addition, the SQA has recently completed a review of its travel and subsistence policies and, as a result, has aligned them more closely with other public sector bodies.
Patrick Harvey.
Thank you. Value for money is indeed something that we should all be able to expect, but it seems hard to continue that expectation in the light of the revelations. Anyone who thought that the SQA's business was looking after Scottish education would have been astonished to learn about £17,000 being spent on business class travel to Saudi Arabia and officials staying in the top-end hotels that they can possibly find. It's been said that security is one of the justifications or excuses for using top-end hotels, but I hardly think that Athens is the kind of war zone where the only way to stay safe is to stay in this lap of five-star luxury. Does the Cabinet Secretary recognise that this needs a culture change within the SQA and any other bodies that are treating themselves to such luxury at public expense?
Cabinet Secretary.
There's two substantive points in the question that Mr Harvey raises. The first is about whether there's any justification for international activity for the Scottish Qualifications Authority. Now, that's been a long-standing part of the work of the SQA over many years. There is, of course, a debate to be had about whether that is appropriate or not. It has become the established practice of the SQA to undertake that, and it's also an operation that brings economic benefit because it is essentially using the skills and reliability and authority of the Scottish Qualifications Authority to certificate learning in other jurisdictions. Now, as I say, there is a debate to be had about whether that's appropriate or not, but it's been judged over many years to be an appropriate way for the SQA to proceed. The second substantive point is in relation to the value for money of any public expenditure associated with any of this activity. And as I've indicated to Mr Harvey, the SQA has recently completed a review of its travel and subsistence policies and, as a consequence, has aligned them much more closely with other public sector bodies. That's what I would expect, and I'm glad that that's now been the case.
Patrick Harvey.
Well, leaving aside the question of luxury, and I certainly hope that we do see greater alignment with value for money in future, moving on to the issue of that wider international relationship. Clearly, those pursuing these relationships around the world do need to have an ethical dimension. And the idea that these luxury holidays to the Ritz-Carlton in Saudi Arabia are about developing a relationship with that brutal regime, that brutal dictatorship, which should not simply be treated as yet another potential business partner, a source of funds. There needs to be an ethical dimension to this. It's been reported that all government departments in the Saudi dictatorship have benefited from this relationship. Can the Scottish Government confirm whether or not it is true that the Saudi Ministry of Defence personnel have been involved in securing the services of the SQA, and whether that is remotely morally justifiable if it is true?
Cabinet Secretary.
I can't confirm that point from Mr Harvey, but I will explore that issue and write to him in due course. I think the substantive issue that Mr Harvey raises is about whether or not it is appropriate for the SQ to be involved in international activity. And that is a point I have fully acknowledged is a point of debate. What the SQA is obliged to do as a public body, although it operates independently of ministers, is that it has a duty to contribute to the advancement of equality. And it has to be mindful in all of its actions as to whether that duty is being fulfilled by the activity that it's taking forward. So I will raise with the SQA the issues that Mr Harvey has raised with me. I'll be seeing the Chief Executive of the SQA for one of my routine conversations tomorrow, and I will ensure that these issues are fully and openly discussed for the SQA board to reflect on the issues that Mr Harvey has raised.
And Liz Smith.
Cabinet Secretary is very aware that on several occasions for the Education Committee in this Parliament, we've had a discussion about just what expenditure is in the public interest when it comes to SQA. And as he rightly says, that's a very legitimate debate to be had. But does he agree that there has been an issue about transparency, and that in this recent set of allegations, and they are only allegations, but in this recent set of allegations, it's taken members of this Parliament to probe further when it should have been questions that were easily answered by SQA officials?
Cabinet Secretary.
There should be transparency on these issues. There is quite clearly a legislative framework in place that enables that to be the case. As I've indicated to Parliament today, the SQA has recently completed a review of its travel and subsistence policies, and the issue of transparency around that is one that I'm sure the SQA will reflect upon.
Thank you very much. Question number 3, Richard Lyle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what it's doing to support small businesses.
Minister Kate Forbes.
Well, the Scottish Government is committed to supporting small businesses and to creating the conditions where businesses are empowered to grow and to succeed. One of the primary ways that we support small businesses is through the most generous package of rates relief in the UK, and that includes the Small Business Bonus Scheme. As of the 31st of May 2019, over 120,000 properties received support through the Small Business Bonus Scheme, with 111,000 of those receiving 100% relief. So the amount of small business bonus relief being awarded in 2019 was £266 million, up from £248 million at the same time in 2018.
Richard Lyle.
To thank the Minister for that answer. Many small businesses require the help of the Scottish Government's Small Business Bonus Scheme to continue to trade. At this point, I have to declare that as an MSP, my constituency office actually receives relief through the Small Business Bonus Scheme. I wonder how many opposition MSPs have declared that in committee. It is, I am led to believe, proposed by opposition members in this place to remove this much welcome scheme. Am I wrong, Minister? Can the Minister also advise this chamber what could happen if the scheme is in fact removed by what I would call hypocritical opposition members?
Minister.
Well, the member is right. As it stands, opposition MSPs, and that is the Tories, who profess to support business, and Labour, who claim to support progressive tax policies, and the Greens have voted for an amendment to the non-domestic rates bill, which effectively abolishes the Small Business Bonus Scheme, as well as many other important reliefs which support economic growth and increase fairness. Incidentally, those were two key themes of the Barclay Review. The Small Business Bonus Scheme is a vital part of our package of measures to assist smaller businesses, and I think the business community have spoken very clearly and very loudly in the last few weeks about their views on the abolition of this relief.
Richard Lyle.
There you have it. Remove at your peril. I believe that this government has helped small businesses to survive and wish to see the continuation of this scheme. What steps has the government taken to ensure that it does?
Minister.
Well, we will continue to work with stakeholders to ensure that the non-domestic rates bill supports growth, it improves the administration of the system and it increases fairness. And it is concerning that many of our key stakeholders, including the FSB, Scottish Retail Consortium and UK Hospitality, no longer believe that the bill, as amended by the Tories and Labour and the Green, is supporting growth and increasing fairness as it stands. But I do welcome the fact that the Local Government and Communities Committee is taking further evidence on this amendment, and I've offered to provide further evidence to the committee in the new year and look forward to their response.
Thank you. And Jamie Green.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Whilst we're on the topic of hypocrisy, the non-domestic rates bill will penalise small businesses with a £7 million per year tax hike on the independent school sector. A policy which has attracted widespread criticism, not just from the opposition, but from the education sector and parents alike. This is clearly a flawed piece of legislation in this respect. So let me ask the Minister whether the Scottish Government will listen to those concerns and commit to sitting down with opposition parties and finding some compromise and a sensible way forward on this very important issue.
Well, I am surprised that the member is asking a question about independent schools as a supplement supplementary to a question about business when independent schools have been at pains to say that they are not businesses, they are charities. But I have committed to discussing this issue further. But I have to say, from a member who repeatedly stands up and talks about things like the rollout of broadband or mobile connectivity, his members have just voted to abolish rates relief to, and I quote, fibre broadband, mobile mast relief to ensure that new build properties are not liable for rates in the first 12 months. So in terms of hypocrisy, the hypocrisy at the moment comes from the Tories, who have no legs to stand on when it comes to supporting the businesses anymore.
Thank you. That concludes topical questions.